So next month, Elizabeth Warren and Nancy Pelosi are headlining a DNC Fundraiser. And yes, it's as bad as it sounds. I really don't know which part of the story annoys me the most. The fact that Elizabeth Warren, who has been railing against corruption and money in politics the entire primary, will now be headlining a fundraising event hosted by people who were big money bundlers for Hillary Clinton in 2016, people who helped run Hillary Clinton's super PACs back in 2016 during the election, and some people who are a combination of both. So this is probably the fourth or fifth clear example of Elizabeth Warren being dishonest about her real position on money in politics during the primary season. It also gets under my skin that Elizabeth Warren is headlining this event, and every big name associated with this event is on the record against Medicare for All. So there are at least one or two people who are hosting this event who, as well as being big money bundlers for Hillary Clinton back in 2016, they are also on the board of healthcare companies. So they clearly don't support Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All single-payer healthcare plan. You also have the other person that's headlining this event with Elizabeth Warren, Nancy Pelosi, who is one of the fiercest, unrepentant opponents of Medicare for All. And like I mentioned, all the other hosts of the events were either big money bundlers for Hillary Clinton, or they were bundlers as well as people who ran Hillary Clinton's super PACs back in 2016. So it's safe to say if you were raising hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars on behalf of Hillary Clinton, you're firmly against Medicare for All single payer, because Hillary Clinton was firmly and staunchly against Medicare for All single payer. So again, Elizabeth Warren, at a time where there's an open question about whether or not you actually support Medicare for All single payer, you're gonna headline a fundraising event for the DNC hosted by people who are on the record against Medicare for All. Which brings me to the third part about this whole thing that annoys me, which is we all know for a fact that the money that they raise at this fundraiser is going to go to cheating progressives in primaries and propping up corporate establishment Democrats who will defend the status quo, who will be against Medicare for All, who will be against ending the wars, who will be against free public college and eliminating all student loan debt. That's where all of the money that is going to be raised at this fundraiser is going to go to cheating progressives and propping up corporate Democrats like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and all these other Democrats who are willing to be bought and paid for by these different industries. So I guess I'll start with the hypocrisy in all of this. Elizabeth Warren has made it the centerpiece of her campaign to rail against the corruption in Washington, D.C. and the money in politics and these millionaires and billionaires buying influence and basically buying politicians, because in the United States, we've legalized bribery and influence is up for sale. Now, the problem with Elizabeth Warren saying those things is there are many, many examples of her participating in that very same corruption. Now, like I mentioned earlier in the video, this is about the fourth or fifth time she's either directly contradicted the explicit text of her own campaign fundraising pledge or campaign finance pledge, or at the very least contradicted and violated the spirit of that deal, which is that when politicians take money from corporations and billionaires and millionaires, it influences their policy positions and they then are more beholden and willing to do favors for their donors. So I think the specific text of her campaign finance pledge said that she won't attend big money closed door fundraisers. So technically this isn't a closed door event. I think regular people can sign up to go or pay to get in, or however they're doing it. So technically it's not a closed door fundraiser, but you are going to a fundraising event hosted by the very same influence peddlers, the people who facilitated the corruption in the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016. You're going to an event to raise money for those very same people. So I don't know what else to say about that. What more to say about that? You just look like a hypocrite. And this has just become a pattern of of Elizabeth Warren being dishonest about her position on money in politics, if not just flat out lying. After she came out with the pledge and she made a whole big deal about it, she was doing an interview with Cenk and she said, oh, but this doesn't really count for the general election. In the general election, I'm taking super PAC money, I'm taking corporate money, I'm taking lobbyist money, I'm taking dark money, I'm taking all of it because I don't believe in unilateral disarmament. So that was the first time she contradicted this populist, leftist, progressive rhetoric of being against corruption and money in politics. But then if that wasn't enough, in the middle of the primary, there was a story about how Elizabeth Warren's campaign got a mega donor in the Democratic Party to pay for the voter data from the DNC for her. So that mega donor donated $170,000 on behalf of Elizabeth Warren so that her campaign could get access to the DNC's voter data. And then when she was checked on that, Elizabeth Warren tried to get off on a sleazy technicality, and she had someone from her campaign come out and say, well, technically, Elizabeth Warren didn't violate the campaign finance pledge that she took because it wasn't her who went out and solicited that $170,000 donation from that mega donor. It was someone on her staff. It was someone in her campaign who did it. So technically, it wasn't her begging millionaires for money. And then also the other technicality, how she didn't violate that campaign finance pledge when she begged for that $170,000 donation from that mega donor, was when she sent that person from her campaign to beg for that cash to solicit that $170,000 donation. It wasn't done at a big dollar fundraiser, a closed door, big money fundraiser, which is what we said we weren't going to do in that campaign finance pledge. Like, Liz, you know you're splitting hairs here, but that's not even it. Maybe a little over a week ago now, there was a story that came out about how Elizabeth Warren is actually using big money that she raised in closed door events with millionaires and billionaires to run her primary campaign. Back when she was running her re-election campaign for her Senate race, what she was doing was raising money for her presidential primary because she already knew she was going to run in the primary, but she knew she couldn't beg billionaires and millionaires for cash during the primary because Bernie Sanders was not going to be doing it, and he would be pointing out how anyone who does do that is corrupt. Elizabeth Warren made the decision, okay, let me do all the gross, sleazy, begging for cash and prostituting myself during what is technically my Senate re-election campaign, but I'm going to take that money, I'm going to transfer it to my primary campaign fund. And that's exactly what she did. She took $10 million that she raised in these fundraising events with big money bundlers and influence peddlers in the Democratic Party. She took that money and she transferred it to her primary campaign. And now, right now in that same primary, she's railing against money in politics and influence peddlers and politicians being beholden to their donors. And then here we are again with this story. She's headlining DNC Fundraiser with Nancy Pelosi, hosted by Hillary Clinton's big money bundlers and people who ran super PACs for Hillary Clinton. Now, to the fact that this is basically a fundraising event for people who hate Medicare for all, it is crystal clear to anyone paying even a minimal amount of attention to politics that Nancy Pelosi is clearly against Medicare for all, single-payer healthcare. She's made it clear in her town halls. Anytime she's asked in an interview, she makes clear that she's a capitalist and she's against government takeover of healthcare, even though every other modern country in the world has a version of single-payer healthcare. Nancy Pelosi says she's against it. There were multiple stories this year of Nancy Pelosi's top staffers using talking points from private health insurance lobbyists to make the argument to Democratic lawmakers as to why we can't have Medicare for all in the United States. Using talking points directly from health insurance lobbyists and executives. And there were also stories about other people, senior staffers, Nancy Pelosi's top staffers, going around to those very same lobbyists and executives in the private health insurance industry, telling them, hey man, look, don't worry. When Democrats have control of the House, but you can be assured Nancy Pelosi will never back a Medicare for all single-payer healthcare system. You don't have to worry about that. So she's going around consoling the people profiting off of the corrupt private health insurance system that we have now, reassuring them that, look, man, there's nothing to worry about. We took all that money. We know what the deal is. We know what's up. We took the millions of dollars in donations. So we know that we're going to be against Medicare for all when the time comes. And so it's clear Nancy Pelosi is against Medicare for all. And she's also headlining this event with Elizabeth Warren. But some of the people who are hosting this event actually sit on the board of medical companies that have a direct financial interest to be against Medicare for all and single payer. Those very same people are hosting this event, this fundraising event that Elizabeth Warren will be headlining next month. So again, this is just a bad look for Elizabeth Warren. People already don't trust you. People on the left already don't trust you to actually fight for Medicare for all as hard as you should fight for it. And to show how much you don't care about the actual concerns, the substantive policy concerns of progressives and leftists in the Democratic Party, you go in the middle of a primary, you go and headline a fundraiser with a group of people who hate and despise and fight against Medicare for all more than anyone else in the country. Like, are we still having this conversation about whether or not Elizabeth Warren actually supports Medicare for all? The answer is no. The answer is no. If you go by her record, her history on this issue, until she decided that she'd be running in the Democratic primary, she had been silent on this issue. She had not been out front fighting for Medicare for all like Bernie Sanders has been for decades. She's been silent on this issue. Before 2017, we still had 40,000 people dying every year in the United States because they can't afford basic health care. We still had over 20 million people without health insurance in the United States. We still had insane rising copays and deductibles and premiums in the United States that were going through the roof and were the leading cause of bankruptcies. Medical bills and medical costs were the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States. All those things were true while Elizabeth Warren was a United States senator, and she proudly repped the title of the second most progressive senator in the United States. All of that was true, and Elizabeth Warren didn't have a goddamn word to say about Medicare for all until 2017, when she was trying to pretend like she was Bernie Sanders on the issue to get support from the left. And basically everyone else in the country, because as the polls show, Medicare for all is just a popular policy position. Doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum. It's over 70% popularity in the Democratic Party, over 60% popularity in the country, including when you poll Republicans and independents. So it's basically political suicide to run in a Democratic primary and be against Medicare for all. So Elizabeth Warren made the calculation, okay, now I'm going to pretend like I'm for Medicare for all, sometimes, half the time when I talk about it in rhetoric. And that doesn't cut it for me. It's very convenient to say make a fervent left-wing defense of Medicare for all when you're on the debate stage and millions of people are watching you and it's an easy applause line. Yeah, it's anybody can do that. But I know for a fact Elizabeth Warren was not making that case when Medicare for all seemed like an impossibility in the United States. Back when in 2015, when Bernie Sanders was running his campaign on Medicare for all, everyone laughed at him. Everyone in the mainstream media, everyone in the Democratic Party, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, they said that was not going to happen. They said that could not happen in the United States. And now, after Bernie Sanders literally changed national discourse on the issue, that's when Elizabeth Warren's going to raise her hand like, oh, I'm with it too. But we see your actions. We see what you actually do. We see that you're doing this fundraiser with a group of people who hate Medicare for all and fight as hard against it as anyone else in this country. So the jury's not out for me. It's pretty clear Elizabeth Warren does not support Medicare for all. And then the third thing that's really getting under my skin, like I said earlier, I know for a goddamn fact all the money that is raised in this fundraiser that Elizabeth Warren will be headlining with Nancy Pelosi, all that money will be spent towards cheating progressives in primaries and propping up corporate Democrats who will take money from corporations and millionaires and billionaires and sell out their constituents. That is where all this money that is going to be raised at this DNC fundraiser is going to go towards. And that's another thing. This whole fundraiser, it's done similarly in the way that Emily List is set up, where they use identity politics to mask the corruption and the support of establishment status quo candidates. The event is a women's leadership forum, but all the women involved are corporate Democrats. It's a fundraiser for the DNC, which is the home of corporate Democrats. And the money that they're raising, you can bet your bottom dollar, will go to candidates that are corporate Democrats. Not just all women candidates that are running in the Democratic primaries or in the Democratic Party. It's going to be corporate Democrats. They're not going to be giving money to Paula Jean Swearengin. I could promise you that. They wouldn't be giving any money to Cori Bush, who's running to primary corporate Democrat in the 2020 primaries. They're not going to be giving money to progressives. That money is going to be reserved for corporate Democrats who will defend the status quo and who will fight against Medicare for all and who will fight against free college and who will fight against ending the wars and all the other progressive policy priorities. That's who that money is going to be going to. I would love for someone with a straight face try to make the argument that that's not true. Are you really going to tell me that big money bundlers for Hillary Clinton and people who ran super PACs for Hillary Clinton back in 2016, are you going to tell me that they weren't in on the rigging of the primary against Bernie Sanders and to prop up Hillary Clinton? You're going to tell me they weren't in on it? Oh yes, because the mainstream media was implicated. CNN was caught leaking debate questions to the Hillary Clinton campaign in the primary. People at the New York Times like Maggie Haberman were caught propping up the Hillary Clinton campaign. Debbie Wasserman Schultz was talking to the head of MSNBC whenever Hillary Clinton would get some mildly critical coverage on that network. The individual state parties that were fighting to keep closed primaries in certain states and who were kicking Bernie Sanders voters off of the voter registry so that they couldn't vote in the primary, all of them were in on it. Everyone is in on it except for Hillary Clinton's big money bundlers and the people who are running her super PACs. Everyone else was in on the rigging the primaries to cheat progressives and to prop up the establishment status quo candidate. Everyone else was in on it except for those people. That's not a convincing argument. Nancy Pelosi, are you really going to tell me that she's going to be headlining an event to raise money for progressives? Really? Nancy Pelosi? What does Nancy Pelosi have to say about the DCCC's new rule to blacklist any contractors, anyone who's doing business with progressive, insurgent progressive candidates who are primarying status quo establishment corporate Democrats who are incumbents? What does Nancy Pelosi think about that rule? She's obviously in favor of it because she hasn't said a word about it since the DCCC put it in place months ago. So Nancy Pelosi, who is at the head of Democratic leadership right now, is backing a bill or a new rule to cheat progressives to make sure that we don't have any more insurgent candidates who beat incumbents like how AOC beat Joe Crowley in the 2018 primary. Which Nancy Pelosi is making sure that never happens again. She doesn't want to see that. She doesn't want to see progressives get elected and take over the party. So she's doing everything in her power to cheat them. So again, you mean to tell me she's going to be headlining an event to raise money that is just going to go, it's going to be spread equally amongst women candidates. So Elizabeth Warren, who again is trying to jump in front of this whole progressive movement and pretend like she's just as lefty as Bernie, is doing an event raising money for the DNC that is going strictly to cheat progressives and to prop up corporate Democrats. An event hosted by Hillary Clinton's big money bundlers and people who ran super PACs on behalf of Hillary Clinton, and is also being headlined by Nancy Pelosi, public enemy number one to progressives. This is especially problematic because we all know Elizabeth Warren did that interview with Cenk Uygur after the 2016 election, and she said she's going to make a spirited defense of Joe Manchin. She said that she's against primary and corporate Democrats. And I should also add, when she said that to Cenk Uygur was still co-founder of Justice Democrats that was running a progressive primary challenger against Joe Manchin. Paula Jean Swearengin was running on Bernie Sanders' progressive policy platform against Joe Manchin in West Virginia. And when asked how she feels about primary and corporate Democrats and Joe Manchin was named, she says, I'll make a spirited defense of Joe Manchin, and that she doesn't support putting that kind of pressure on incumbent Democrats. So this is very telling of what you would expect if Elizabeth Warren was in the White House. Our President Elizabeth Warren is not going to bolster and back up the progressive movement. She will be just like Barack Obama. She will use you for your votes, and she will leave your ass at the door. She doesn't really seem to get the urgency of the movement to take over the Democratic Party, to have the progressive left take over the Democratic Party from the establishment Democrats, the corporate Democrats. She doesn't get the urgency of that movement, which is why the other day when she went out and endorsed two progressive candidates who were primarying incumbent Democrats, I didn't buy that for a second, because at the time she was getting hammered in left-wing progressive independent media and in some places in print outlets too, because there were stories coming out about how Elizabeth Warren has been in secret talks with Hillary Clinton, and they've been calling each other and they've been meeting and they've been talking and whatever it is. And then a few days after that, there was the story about how she transferred that $10 million from her Senate campaign that was raised in big money fundraising events from millionaires and billionaires, and she's using that money in her primary campaign right now. So you had all these negative stories that would turn progressives off from Elizabeth Warren. And then at the same time that happens, conveniently, now Elizabeth Warren is in favor of primarying corporate Democrats, everybody. She's going to endorse two progressives challenging corporate Democrats in the 2020 primary. So it looked like a cheap gimmick to me when she did it, because the very last time I've heard her speak about primarying corporate Democrats, she was against it. And all of her actions ever since then have shown that she's against progressives challenging corporate Democrats in the primary. I mean, look what happened in 2016 with Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders was basically the progressive insurgent candidate, and Hillary Clinton was a status quo defending establishment corporate Democrat. Elizabeth Warren didn't back Bernie Sanders. Instead she wrote a letter begging Hillary Clinton to run in the race in 2013. She was part of the letter that every Democratic women senator signed to beg Hillary Clinton to run in 2013. So up until now, Elizabeth Warren's position on challenging corporate Democrats in primaries has been very clear. Don't do it. So I wasn't going to give her any credit when she endorsed two progressives, because it looked like she was just trying to get the heat off of her and change the narrative and take over the news cycle again by making her look like a super lefty progressive, which is what she's been doing this entire primary campaign. Saying whatever, whenever necessary to make her look like she's just as left as Bernie. So really, there's no difference between the two of them. I see other people in progressive independent media are finally fed up and have had enough with Elizabeth Warren's bullshit and have taken the gloves off. To them, I'd say you're a little late, but welcome to the party, because the shit Elizabeth Warren's been doing is so bad. It is so bad. And it really is incredibly ignorant or dishonest when anyone tries to pretend like she's damn near Bernie Sanders, or she's pretty close to Bernie Sanders, or that she's a great progressive candidate, because none of those things are true. Elizabeth Warren's better than Hillary Clinton. She's better than Joe Biden. Whoop-de-freaking do. That's not that much of an achievement. But if you want to compare her to what we should expect or from a progressive politician, she falls way short on that scale. So she's better than the worst politicians of our time, but she's not that great herself.